Welcome to Grit with Wisdom. This is the podcast that delves deep into the inner psyche of mountain bikers from all walks of life in order to discover the tools and the tactics that can help us all have more fun out on the trails more often. Our aim here is to help you understand what it takes to push our own personal boundaries in the sport we love from a mental performance perspective. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to take a couple of seconds here to give a huge shout out to Da Vinci Cycles. Given that this podcast is predominantly filmed trailside after a ride, it literally couldn't happen without them. I've been riding the Spartan, which is their long travel split pivot enduro machine, for the better part of a year now, and it just keeps getting better and better. Whether I'm ripping blue trails with clients, out on an all-day alpine epic adventure, or perhaps trying to keep up on the steep and deep with some of the pro riders I get to ride with as part of this podcast, I can hands down say it's the most versatile, confidence-inspiring bike I've ever owned. So huge thank you to the team over at Da Vinci for making great bikes. One last thing I wanted to share with all of you valued listeners today. I've recently teamed up with the legends over at Tailored Trails down in Tasmania to create a unique mountain biking expedition to one of the most beautiful, most exciting places to ride a bike in the world. This guided coaching expedition is going to be an immersive 7-day mountain biking experience running from Feb 11 to Feb 17, 2025. Think zero faff, no logistics, all fun. It's time to say g'day to some of the world's finest single track. If you'd like to learn more about this one, head over to our website or Instagram, which are both linked down in the show notes. Now let's rip right into the podcast. Enjoy. Today on the podcast, I am lucky enough to be sitting down here with Dr. Ryan Darcy, who is a mountain biker, a neuroscientist, and an entrepreneur. Originally from Williams Lake in BC, Ryan studied neuropsychology on Vancouver Island before completing his PhD in neuroscience. These days, he's based in Surrey, southeast of Vancouver, where he works as a professor and the president of NeuroCatch, which is a device that evaluates cognitive function. The reason I'm most excited to speak with Ryan today is that he, along with the NeuroCatch team, have recently teamed up with Crankworx to prioritize brain health in mountain biking. And along with that, they've been working with none other than 5-time world DH champion, Aaron Gwin. Ryan, with no further ado, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me.
I'm stoked to have you here. Before we get into some of my questions, I wanted to give you the opportunity. Is there anything there I missed in that super short intro that you'd like to add?
No, I think it was a great intro. Yeah, we're pretty excited coming off of Crankworx, with having NeuroCatch deployed right at the end of the DH course and other courses. It was an amazing event.
Fantastic, man. Yeah, what an action-packed 2 weeks. Excited to unpack a little bit of that with you. Before we get into that, we'd love to maybe dial the clock back a little bit and talk about your background. I'm going to start with a wide open question here. Obviously, mountain biking, mindset, these are the things that really get me fired up, excited. What gets you fired up?
Well, definitely mountain biking. I live on the North Shore, and so I ride a lot. I think my biggest claim to fame is that my first mountain bike was a Norco Sasquatch, which I can track to the mid 1980s when mountain biking first rolled in. So I've been riding mountain bikes for a very long time. Like that makes it 35 or 40 years.
Fantastic, man. What a rich history. And growing up in Williams Lake, what was that like? And when did the idea of riding bikes first come into your life?
Well, I mean, I was like every kid, I was riding bikes from the beginning, but I remember the onset of, I was in Williams Lake when mountain biking kind of became a thing, and got interested in it. What are now actually trails on Trail Forks you can find, but back then they weren't, and we would just kind of climb up to the top of a mountain and then fire down and try not to hit a tree.
Wow.
Yeah.
So from what I understand, I've not ridden there myself. It's pretty steep, pretty loose terrain.
Yeah, very loose. This was very dry and very loose. Not quite like riding the shore or Squamish or Whistler.
Right. Yeah. Sounds very different, but super cool in its own way.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun. There was obviously no suspension. The technology's come pretty far. I actually, when I was in university in Victoria, I did a brief stint of racing amateur too. But back then, I liked downhill, but they didn't have rear suspension. We were still running front suspension only. So I saw that
Right.
too. So I'm a techie guy, obviously brain scanner and all that. So I love the technology in mountain biking too. I'm totally a gearhead.
Yeah. Fantastic. And that kind of journey into mountain biking as a kid or as a teenager, is it something that came easily to you, or is it something you really had to work at to perhaps find the love and the feeling of like this is easy, this is fun?
Oh, it's so my big thing when I was growing up was actually ski racing, and I moved from Williams Lake down to the island, and so ski racing kind of got curtailed. So I was already obviously a kid riding, but I think that's when mountain biking became a big alternative for me. And I used it in high school. I rode a lot in high school and then through university and continued. My son, he can absolutely. I struggle to keep up with him now. He's a North Shore kid, but it's been fun because I ride with him too and try not to crash.
That's fantastic. Hey, being able to pass it on to the younger generation and
Yeah.
seeing them excel like past where you got to.
Yeah.
That's super
Yeah.
cool.
They're way past the concept of breaking bones when I was a kid and the concept of breaking a bone today, they're different. There's a almost an acceptance of that's going to happen today. Whereas back when we were riding, I don't think we really ever, it happened, but it wasn't something where you would look at a road gap and accept that if you didn't make it, you were probably ending up at the casting clinic in Lionsgate. But the kids today, they kind of just, that's part of it, I guess. But I think, the key part about that obviously is I always ride also being a very, my profession is focused on brain health and brain injury. And so that's the stuff that I generally kind of try to advance through what we do so that if it's not a bone, if it's your head, we can do some more sophisticated stuff around how to take care of your brain because that's not the same as breaking a bone. Your brain doesn't heal like a bone.
Totally. Yeah. Super interesting stuff to think about, isn't it? Like on one hand, you're saying there the kids and maybe even the adults these days as well are less worried about breaking bones, perhaps because the technology has got better and the ability to heal bones.
Right.
But like you're saying, there's perhaps still a lot of work, which it sounds like you're really playing a key role in
I think so.
discovering, yeah, how
Yeah.
we can prevent brain injuries and how we can better recover from them as well.
Yeah, and I think part of it too, before getting into the kind of the brain side of things, um, I mean, the bikes that we ride today give you a lot of confidence. You can ride things you couldn't ride ever, and a lot of times the crashes can be more spectacular because of that. So it is a factor, I think. Yeah, we have to helmet technology is improving for sure, but there's a lot we can do in terms of brain health to help not only protect athletes but also recover them if they have a concussion.
Right. Well, super excited to dive into some of that in a sec. Before we do, I'm curious, like, what was it that first got you interested in learning more about how the brain works?
um, I've been asked this question a number of times, and I can't tell you quite in detail. High school biology 11. I got shipped to a boarding school on Vancouver Island, Brentwood College. And, I had an incredible biology teacher who noticed that I was really interested in biology, and so he upgraded me and gave me a instead of the cow eyeball dissection project, he let me dissect anything I wanted. I don't know why, but I picked a dogfish, and all I really wanted to do was get into the brain of that dogfish, and that was my first memory of being really interested in brains.
Oh, that's
And
super cool that you can trace it back in such detail.
yeah, yeah, well, it's even more cool because we reunited, years ago when I gave a TEDx talk there, and we've since gone on to partner in doing, research and science together. So we were active in research around concussion and subconcussion in contact sports, to this day. Yeah.
Wow, isn't that special?
Yeah, it's really
And
cool.
walk me through the years in between dissecting the stockfish's brain and then, yeah, just deciding to study neuropsychology at the university.
Well, at University of Victoria, it was I had an incredible mentor who was a brain injury specialist, and back then neuroscience really didn't exist as a discipline, so you kind of found it between a combination of biology and psychology, which ultimately the intersection at University of Victoria was neuropsych. Um, when I went, I did my undergraduate degree, so I was too scared to go to the States, but I wanted to go and head out of the province. So I found my way to Halifax, Nova Scotia, on the other side of the country. And there I started in a really incredible neuroscience training program that focused on a number of different disciplines of neuroscience, but I particularly focused on non-invasive brain imaging. So always joke that I always been scared of needles, don't really want to be poked and prodded, and to use technology to peer in and watch your brain in action and using physics in non-invasive ways is just like it lights me up. I love it. It's really cool.
Oh man, it's so cool to hear the passion in your voice as you're talking about that.
Yeah.
And were you always kind of interested when you first started studying neuropsychology? Were you always interested in its application towards sports? Or is that something that came about a little later on?
No, it came about a little later. I think I was actually interested in neurology primarily, which hooked me to understand that you could have these um, lesions or damage to your brain that would result in these like incredible phenomenon, right? Whether or not it would be things like a particular lesion could eliminate your ability to recognize faces or to not to see the entire left side of your world, right? So I got interested in the brain in that way, and then I also always saw cool brain images, and I got interested in the technology side of it. And at when I went to Dalhousie, that's when I really got interested in the clinical side originally of trying to help in hospitals with major brain injuries and I spent a lot of time doing kind of very translational work. So people around me were at lab benches doing amazing research with sort of what we call wet neuroscience, test tubes and pipettes, and I was actually in the clinic recording patient brainwaves and changing their lives. And so as a even in training, I realized like this was amazing because you could see the stuff you were developing and inventing in the lab was actually helping someone, and I really got bit by that bug. I wanted to do a lot more of that.
That's super cool. And it sounds like kind of early application in a lot of traditional team sports like football and hockey. And then more
So,
recently, perhaps
so,
extreme sports.
so the way sports came back into the fray, because I was always, I mean, I went to very much sports based high schools and was always in sports. It came back into the fray from a neuroscience perspective when we developed our portable brain scanner. That the first area that we focused on, it can scan across a number of different brain conditions, but certainly concussion was a big area of focus and has been. And concussion goes, and there's a lot of connectedness to professional sports, particularly contact sports, adventure and extreme sports. Any of those opportunities. So we really pulled sports, not just concussion, but actually now performance, um, in back into the science because of the portable brain scanner.
Yeah, really cool to hear how perhaps the technology allowed that equipment to leave the lab and
Yeah,
now, yeah, kind of be at use kind of on the edge of a race or a sports game.
yeah, it's
Really
incredible.
cool.
I've spent a career running the most advanced, incredibly like the world's not even really aware of the full power of which we can peer in and watch your brain in action. And I've run these massive embedded, super sophisticated MRI labs and all sorts of devices that get very sciencey very quickly. And they're not accessible to the outside world, right? And so part of why I got excited around the portable brain scanner was to address a problem that what was available to you in the outside world hadn't really changed that much since the 1980s. And there was this big disconnect. And to be able to bridge that gap and bring leading edge technology out into the world is an incredible, so rewarding, right? From a translational aspect. I love that part.
Yeah. So fast forward to the present day, you're working as president of NeuroCatch. Can you tell us a little bit about like what is NeuroCatch and how does the technology work?
Sure. NeuroCatch is the name of our portable brain scanner. The idea that we're pushed and developed in science is a concept that we stood back and realized that there was kind of a big glaring, pardon me, gap in the sense that if I told you about vital signs and I asked you, tell me what are some vital signs, on that list would not be a vital sign for how your brain is doing. And so we sort of were like a little over 10 years. I mean, the research started in the mid 90s, but about 10 or 12 years ago, we were really looking and going, wow, can you believe it? There's not even a vital sign for how your brain is doing. And so it was a scary question to ask, to be honest, because as a neuroscientist, you're trained that the brain is so incredibly complex that it's always about chasing, seeing if you can even get close to that level of complexity. So you're never thinking about simplicity. You're never really thinking, okay, let's get something as simple as blood pressure. And so we kind of had to like flip our thinking and and say, could we get something as simple as blood pressure? And so we effectively kind of reverse engineered from our own science and others how you could have something as easy and as an accessible and critically an objective physiological measure of how your brain's cognitive functioning is doing. And in essence, that is what NeuroCatch is. It's a portable device that's push button that'll give you that result within minutes at any point of care.
Well, so from what I understand, it's three sensors that sit on top of your head via a cap. Is that
Yeah,
right?
if you go into the hospital and you get an EKG and you record your heart's electrical activity, we do the same for your brain. We put sensors that are embedded right now in a cap that record your brain's electrical activity, and then we ping your supercomputer brain with stimuli, just basic sounds and basic words. And there, over 6 minutes, we can extract the specific brain responses to like low level sensory, like when you're processing noises, you're hearing noises, mid level attention, where, for example, if you did this response, if you have a Red Bull, we've seen it change, right? If you have if you miss a night's sleep, it gets worse, sort of thing. So your attentional brain response, and then a higher level cognitive response that is really important for things like competitive advantage and crystal balling the future and seeing where you're going to pick that line if we're sticking with the mountain biking aspect. But it's also actually one of the responses that's adversely impacted by concussion and concussive events. So NeuroCatch gets all three of those, and it does it automatically, and it gives you a medical report that's fully standardized. It says you are in the healthy zone, or here's your particular profile, and these are outside of the healthy zone.
Well, it sounds amazing just in terms of like ease of application, not
Yeah,
having any, like you say, needles or anything protruding. You're just wearing a cap.
yeah,
And
no
then
poking
you're
and
getting,
prodding.
yeah, some quite significant data out of it. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's been quite a ride. I don't think anyone ever conceives that they're going to invent something, let alone then chase it around the planet as it goes, doing all these incredible things. It's really a riot to see it get deployed to all these places across the world.
Yeah, well, congratulations, man. It sounds like the
Yeah.
credit to years and years of hard work and following your passion.
Basically, yeah. Stupid level of tenacity and grit.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, how much character does one need?
Yeah.
In your opinion, why is this technology so important to mountain bikers?
It's interesting having riding. I think it's only through working with people like Aaron Gwin that I've come to really understand. There's a bit of a dualistic nature in mountain biking in the sport right now. Um, as sophisticated as we are with our technologies around our bikes, we haven't, like many, so mountain biking is not special in this way, around the fact that we have, concussion is a big part of crashes. There isn't a sophisticated solution to handling that. And Aaron and I did an article in Single Tracks a year or so ago, and we really made the point that mountain biking has an opportunity to leapfrog up to being one of the most sophisticated ways that you manage that aspect of the sport. And you alluded to it earlier when we were talking. I think if I you could have two conversations. I could talk to you about, hey, you might crash and have a concussion. And in the back of your head, just like in the back of my mind, you're likely thinking, yeah, but I prefer not to crash and never have that conversation with you, Ryan. And I bought a really good helmet, so I'm going to hope that does its job, right? Um, but I could also, if you're racing, I could tell you we could measure your brain processing, how fast you think, and that can allow you to perform better because you do all this work in terms of your cardiovascular fitness and all the skill work in riding, etc. But what about if you could if you could pick your lines faster, if you could analyze the patterns quicker, if you could think faster, keep yourself in that sweet spot, then you're going to actually also protect yourself from crashes that can be concussion injury. And if you already know where you're at with that, should you, in the unlikely event and hopeful event, you have a concussion, we can actually measure you and find out if it's a serious hit or not. And then I apologize, I'm going on too long, but I think
No, this is great.
the key thing that we make the point of is in medicine, you cannot treat what you can't measure, right? So if I can measure it, then I can find effective ways to treat it. And we've made huge progress that's deployed to mountain biking and other sports where we know of things that can help protect your brain. We know of things that if you have a chronic concussion, we can successfully recover you. But the only way we know of those things is because we could measure that they were working.
Wow. Sounds like, yeah, huge positive impact on our sport.
Yeah.
And I think a lot
Hopefully,
of us, when we
hopefully.
talk about, yeah, technology to help with concussion and stuff, we're always thinking about the rehabilitation side of things and perhaps not so much the prevention. I really like where you're going with that. I was reading a little bit about uh, a treatment called red light therapy you've used with
Right?
other athletes in football and
Yep.
such to
Yeah.
speed up their cognitive processing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious if you could dive in a little bit. Tell us about what is that and how does it work?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a fun story about red light therapy. There's a number of different technologies that are coming down that are innovations that allow you to either improve your performance or recover after an injury or in a disease. Red light therapy is one of them. And what red light energy does or is thought to do is activate your mitochondria, which is your energy powerhouse in your cells. So it gives your cells a little more energy. Um, there's My fun story is that we use that in our clinic here in general for accelerating healing. As an example, this is one of the fringe benefits of working across both domains. I took a bad fall in the Whistler bike park years ago, and my shoulder was not recovering as quickly as I wanted. And I used red light therapy to accelerate the recovery of that, and it definitely worked. So that was kind of cool. But there's also red light. You can do red light therapy for your brain. Um, there's a technology company we work closely with called Neuronic, which has a helmet that you can do 10 minutes of red light therapy under. And we recently chased and followed NeuroCatch to the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. And we were at Lee Steinberg's Super Bowl party with these folks. And we took a wide receiver college football player and benchmarked him in NeuroCatch in terms of how fast he was cognitively processing, and then actually did 10 minutes of red light therapy, and then checked him again, and his cognitive processing increased by over 50 milliseconds. So it definitely changed his physiology. We could see it, and it definitely sped up his thinking.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So do you see the future of this technology kind of going into an athlete's training plan and perhaps their pre-game or pre-race run preparation?
There's a host of things that are coming out that we use now for performance optimization and recovery. Red light therapy is one for sure. There's actually in our clinic here where a lot of Red Bull riders and elite mountain bikers come through. Shout out to Todd Schumack who and Performance X who's brought a lot of his team through as well. The what we have sort of in our toolbox, in addition to red light therapy, we have neuromodulation and neurostimulation through a device called the PONS that is very effective at recovering from chronic concussion. We have supplements. I mentioned earlier about protective factors for brain health. We have advanced supplements that we know are protective against, let's say, exposure to contact and subconcussive forces over the course of a training season or racing season. We have, in addition to that, we have actually autonomic nervous system rebalancing tools. We have neurofeedback tools. We have a number of technologies that are all evidence-based that we use, powers up our clinical teams to have really incredible outcomes. And yeah, for sure, red light therapy is in there, and it's emerging, and we're using it and watching it closely.
Wow. Yeah, really cool to hear about just how many aspects or how many different ways you're kind of working towards not only healing from a concussion, but preventing it in the first place.
Yeah,
And that was
yeah,
kind of a question I had for you. We've all heard that analogy of like the brain is like a muscle, you need to train it just like you would strengthen your shoulder or strengthen any of our other muscles. But yeah, I was curious. It sounds like through the supplements and through some of these other modalities, there is ways that we can strengthen our brain or strengthen our head so that we're less likely to become concussed or lessen the impact of that concussion.
yeah. Current the state of science right now is sort of switching that metaphor a little bit to more of a wiring, like you wire neural circuits. And it turns out the fancy science word for that is neuroplasticity. And it turns out that if you neuroplasticity and that biological capacity to wire new neural circuits in your brain, it's in us all. And so it's either activated for maladaptive reasons or you can activate it for adaptive reasons, right? So, for example, a maladaptive example of neuroplasticity working against you would be chronic pain. When, let's say, you've got some pain, and a particular type of stimulus can make you, stimulate that pain. You can see somebody go quickly to where if they even visualize that stimulus, they'll feel that pain. So that's you wired a circuit in your brain to maladaptively to continue to experience chronic pain. What we do in our clinic is we focus on grabbing the tiger by the tail, if you will, and directing neuroplasticity for not just recovery from chronic brain injury and other conditions, but actually for performance enhancement. So that's where the technologies come in. We know how it takes work, just like repeated exposure to stimuli can give you that maladaptive experience. We have programs and systems to allow you to actually rewire circuits into positive ways. And that's why I think it's like a muscle isn't like exactly correct anymore. I think it's close, but it's better to think about it like I have the power to rewire the circuits to do anything I want. And that doesn't end when, you move out from being a child to an adult. You can do that all your life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Thank you so much for the insight there. And I really like your last point. I know there's that old saying, like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks,
Yeah.
but I think that's been proven wrong time and time again in science
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can see behind me, that's Trevor Green, who's the soldier who went to Afghanistan, who was attacked with an axe to his brain that went so deep it split the band of fibers that keep the hemispheres together apart. And we work with him on neuroplasticity, and he continues to make unprecedented recovery from probably what is the unofficial largest brain injury survived on the planet. So
Wow.
so if someone like Trevor Green can do it, I I tend to look and say I could do it too, right? It doesn't matter how old I get.
Yeah, such amazing work you're doing. And you did a TED talk specifically on that science, right? I'll be sure to
That's
put
correct. Yeah.
that link down in the show notes.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting watch for anyone interested.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, this technology, it all sounds so exciting and so applicable to what we all do in mountain biking, whether we're a top performing athlete like Aaron or whether we're just a weekend warrior, more like myself. Is this technology available to the general public yet, or is it still,
Yeah, for
being
sure.
tested in the athletic realm?
No, if you're by NeuroCatch, for sure, NeuroCatch is deployed widely across Canada and the United States. It's deployed as far as Australia because of rugby. We're also large in Australia. There's a couple systems that I love. We have one deployed to Sub-Sahara Africa. We have some systems deploying for research purposes into Europe. But it's available in clinics. It's available. I mean, at Crankworx, we had 5 systems on timing flats in Creekside, scanning riders. So it's very available. Yes. So the technologies that we use in our clinic are also available, but primarily it's either connecting to our clinic, which is a performance-based clinic, or our networks of clinics if you're not in the Vancouver area, and getting access. That's the easiest way to get access.
Okay, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
On the concussion note, I wanted to ask the question. So if I fall or a buddy falls and hits their head, what should they be doing immediately?
Well, so the information around concussion is changing rapidly. That's the first thing. So the very first thing I'd want people to know is that there is still some out of date and traditional information. Typically, that would be kind of, lock yourself in a dark room for a number of days and don't move, sort of thing. We know now. It used to be that exercise was thought to be bad, and it's been demonstrated that exercise is good. Exercise is good if you can tolerate it. If you had a crash and you have a concussion, the very first thing you're going to know is check your helmet, because your helmet will be an indicator of how hard the impact was. If you think it's serious, always see a doctor would be the first thing, right? One of the key things for that is to rule out anything that's life threatening. So you want to see a physician right away, either going to emergency or any urgent care or something to that effect. Once that sort of those life threatening aspects have been ruled out, then in general, the idea would be, depending on the severity of your symptoms and the problem, you either would stay in close contact with a physician and a specialist, or you would manage it from a recovery standpoint, from a rehabilitation standpoint. And that's where light exercise that's not necessarily a lot of contact, to the degree that you feel comfortable. So if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. And get to the fundamentals. Diet and exercise and sleep are really important. So you try to stabilize all those things. If Most concussions will resolve naturally and on their own. If it doesn't resolve, then that's the point to seek some advanced clinics, such as ourselves, which specialize in helping to overcome that. And there are now, I'll just add that there are, I mentioned this, dietary supplements that are really good for your brain. This product's not available in Canada, but it is available in the United States. It's called Synquel Plus, Synquell, Synaqeuell, plus by Thorne. And that we use for athletes regularly. I use it myself. It's good for giving you lots of supplements that are good for brain health.
Fantastic. Thank you. I would love when I get the opportunity to speak with brain experts such as yourself, because like you mentioned at the start there, the research and the science and the recommendations on concussion are changing so fast. So it's
Yeah.
always good to get an update from someone like yourself. And I'm curious, you've been around in mountain biking since the beginning, since before I was born. you've seen a lot. You've got a good understanding of the general culture. So what can we as mountain bikers in general do to better prioritize our brain health?
Yeah, if it's before you were born, that makes me officially a dinosaur, doesn't it? I think, first of all, it's really important to know that back to that neuroplasticity component, exercise is probably our most powerful neuromodulator. And when I say neuromodulator, it does really good things for your brain, right? In terms of vascular, your blood vessels and your vascular system, in terms of your neurotransmitters and your brain health in general, what we call trophic factors. Exercise is really good. So regular cardiovascular component of mountain biking is awesome. So I would say that's key for sure. I would say that obviously avoiding large concussive related crashes is key. Uh, we kind of made it, if you're going to the bike park, for example, and you're pushing it, and you have a big crash that's a concussive crash, you want to, that can happen. I don't want to frighten anyone that can happen, but you do want to sort of treat that seriously and try and reduce the number of those impacts, in terms of frequency and number of occurrences. Um, I think those are the main interfaces. Obviously, invest in a good helmet. Don't mess around with helmets. They're super important.
Yeah, really wise advice there. Thank you. Wanted to take a moment here and perhaps dive into your personal journey in mountain biking a little bit. Would love to know, like, for you, what is the why when it comes to riding mountain bikes?
Ha, I'm a flow junkie. In a sense, yeah. I mean, I love uh when I actually like as I grow older, I'm liking the climb more. My son who's turning 18, just likes to shuttle, and doesn't have the tolerance and patience for a climb. But I love looking out into the trees and just the peacefulness of the climb. But at the end of the day, it fascinates me not only as a mountain biker, but as a neuroscientist that you process information faster than the physical limits of your brain. Like, the speed limits that we can transmit information and the rates you can process what's coming down coming at you in the trail. It's so incredible when you get into a flow state. It's just, I think we all know there aren't words to describe it. It's very addictive, and yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
So cool. What do you see when we talk about a neuroscience perspective or a brain scanning perspective? What changes do you see in the brain when someone's in a flow state versus when they're not?
That there's, I got involved in a lot of flow science over the years, and it's still undergoing. We don't know fully, but there is your brain has kind of its cortical, which is the bark on the outside, the cortex, and then subcortical. And it does appear that we down regulate kind of the thinking part of our brain, the part that stores worries and anxieties and is planning, for RRSPs or 401ks. And we kind of down regulate that, and we really go subcortical. And that I think allows for just a more efficient processing, information processing at a level that kind of disconnects it from conscious control thought. And that's pretty cool. Again, the science is moving and changing, so I may be out of date with that, but that was my last understanding of it.
No, that's a really cool insight.
Hmm.
And over the years, are there any kind of tools or tricks or techniques that you've picked up along the way to help get you into that flow state more often?
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I went to through I'm close sort of colleagues and friends with Jamie Wheel, who's a big flow state guy, and he had flow camps, and I went to flow camps, and there are actually devices and apparatus that people can try to get into flow. The big one I always remember is this 360 swing, which was a structured fixed swing that you would loop around. Um, I I think that. computer programmers get into flow state, right? When they're programming. I think it's just mastery of like, whenever I ride, and I'm sure this is like everyone else, the very first thing I'm trying to do is get myself in a sweet spot. So I'm not trying to push too hard. I'm going to force a crash. I'm super obviously tuned in and focused. So if I feel like I'm stressed from work or I've got other thoughts or I'm anxious or whatever, and I realize that I'll dial it back, in how fast I'm riding. And when I don't, I regret it. And then what happens, I find the flow will come to you as long as you don't try to force it. So I think, that's not a scientific answer. That's a personal riding answer. But I believe that, you just have to find kind of when you're on the trail, where's your sweet spot at that moment and that time, and get into that. And then, naturally, just the act of finding lines and descending, flow finds you.
Yeah, I love that personal response because I feel like, yeah, we all have our own personal ways of getting into the flow state.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting when we can go and speak to like 40 different mountain bikers on this podcast and then perhaps take the ways that or the tools that resonate with us most.
Yeah.
So really cool. And I like your point there, kind of starting with a bit of a check-in of like, how am I feeling today? How fast should I be riding? Because that's not always the same, is it?
Yeah, there are days where my ego wants to just crush something, but I just don't feel it. And I think maybe because I'm older and I have to worry about not healing as quick, I check my ego faster, and I don't push it, and then I drop in much easier. And then, if I try to push it, that's when I'm I'm not feeling in flow state at all.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I know kind of what you mentioned there, kind of aging and worrying about crashing or responsibilities and that kind of thing is a thought that can often come into our mind as mountain bikers. Even at my age, I just turned 30, but I don't want to crash. I don't want to get hurt. I can't work either if
Mhm.
that happens to me. So I'm curious, like, how do you deal with, yeah, thoughts of fear or doubt, hesitation, emotions like this while you're riding your bike?
Oh, I had a horrible season. Not not this year or last year, but the year before. I had way too many bad crashes, and I was part of it, large part was I was trying to my son just all of a sudden passed me and dusted me, and I was trying to keep up with him, which was a mistake. But the other part was I didn't realize it at the time, but I was riding the wrong uh rig. I was riding a Santa Cruz Nomad, and it was really bucking me. And I basically changed to a Noli Chilcotin, and immediately my number of crashes dropped precipitously. So I think some of it is very much technology. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There's so many different performance factors that are all intertwined.
Yeah,
But
like when
sometimes
I
I guess
changed
we can.
technology, my fear factor dropped. Even in what was in my head, I felt comfortable on that bike. I knew that bike. And my biggest thing now is I have to be careful not to go too fast, because it can run real fast, and then I could get myself in trouble. So
Yeah, it goes both ways, hey?
just always
But,
I always have to check my ego.
yeah,
I'm not the rider I want to be or think I am.
as long as you're having fun and getting into that flow state, hey, it's not always related
Yeah.
to going the fastest or riding the hardest trails.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic, right? You've obviously had uh, the pleasure of working with probably some of the smartest people on the planet, and I take it you've had your fair amount of really good, really insightful mentors over the years, both in neuroscience and in mountain biking. I'm curious, is there any one bit of advice that sticks out from a mentor that you could share with us today?
From a mentor?
Yeah,
Wow. I've had
something you've been taught or learned from a mentor that kind of stuck with you.
lots of things, lots of things. It's tough to give you one. Um, I've been incredibly successful because of my mentors, not because of me. Um, I think, when I was in at University of Victoria, I had this amazing mentor in neuropsychology, Katie Mateer, and she just really taught me to be purpose driven in how you use science and research to improve healthcare. And I really took that from her. My other big mentor was when I transitioned out of biology, went into kind of physics and engineering for medical imaging, and a fellow by the name of Ian Smith, who was an amazing innovator, was just he was a visionary, and he would drive you to say, you can run around a lot, but if you don't cross any lines, it doesn't count. So I think I've really been focused on trying to make sure that the stuff that we do in the research labs doesn't just produce academic papers, but actually gets out in the world and helps people. And that's definitely because of my impacts on folks like or Ian's impacts on people like myself.
Wow, yeah, I really like that piece of advice.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Hey, this has been a great conversation, super, super insightful. Before we wrap things up, is there any other projects or anything else that you wanted to mention today on this podcast?
Projects, I think it's a huge, I hope anyone who tunes in is tuning in because of interest of ways to optimize brain performance and reduce concussion. And I'd love it if they reach out, spread the word, spread the gospel. If there's a way their networks or otherwise, they can see a way we can connect and get more of what we're doing to help mountain biking, that'd be amazing. So please do, connect, and if you have an interest in what we're doing, we want to collaborate and chat and find ways to help make sure that mountain biking is not interrupted in any way due to brain injury.
Yeah, fantastic. And where can people find NeuroCatch and follow along with the adventure online?
Well, certainly, yeah. We have a good online presence. If you Google NeuroCatch, you should be able to find that. And you're welcome to reach out direct to me. My email's pretty available, but it's ryan@healthtechconnects.com. And I'm sure we can put that in the notes or something. So feel free to
Absolutely.
email me direct.
Yeah, thank you for being open and serving the community in that way. It's super cool. One last question here. Who
Okay.
do you look up to in the mountain bike world and why?
In the mountain bike world, who do I look up to? I definitely gonna go with I really do look up to Aaron. I think what is amazing about Aaron, other than some incredible races, like perhaps one without a chain, and other ones, that his performance is amazing, but he really is thinking at an incredibly visionary level around how to advance the sport, around safety and health and things like concussion. And that's remarkable. So I'm gonna give huge props to Aaron Gwin.
Yeah, awesome. I'm super excited to sit down with Aaron in the near future and get his perspective as well.
Yeah.
Ryan, thanks so much for taking the time today. It's been a really insightful conversation. I've got lots out of it, and I'm sure Alan as well. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
You're welcome, man. I'll give you a virtual fist bump. Yes. What's up, guys? Just one last thing before you hit the trails. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe. It helps us more than you know. And don't be a stranger. I'd love to hear from you about any particular topics, episodes you enjoyed, or even if there's guests that you'd love to hear me interview in the future. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on Instagram at the_mind_mountain. This podcast, mental performance, and mountain biking are all things that are very close to my heart. So I feel super grateful to be able to share these conversations with you. Much love to you all for taking the time to listen. I'll see you on the next one.